Hey there. Haven't seen you for a while, so I'm going to come take you out, give you a little update on what we got going on around here. It is December 28th, 2023, so almost the new year, and it has been surprisingly warm for Christmas time. Last year at Christmas time we had a blizzard, but this year we were outside, took a hike. Well, I should say we walked down the road, not really a hike, but on Christmas, and then the day after Christmas we were outside working in the garden some because we got unfinished business out there. So, but I'm going to show you one of the things we're trying to do is get all of the compost that we have on top of the garden beds so it can sit there for a little bit before winter. You can see this big area here. It's where my son's been working on that. Pretty much has it all shoveled, wheelbarrowed over to the garden beds. You can kind of see there's actually a little bit there. It spreads out and gets really thin. It's kind of a lot of work to scrape all that up, so I don't know. We might just try to get that scraped up with some machinery and even just push it push it down the hill at this point. But anyways, he's been working hard on that. But obviously this time of year everything's dormant, so um, so there's not too much to show as far as what's living or growing and all that. But we did get a lot of stuff cleared out. Bring you down here. This area, actually, my son's wanting to build a RC track. So there actually used to be a barn here way before we owned this place, and he wants to kind of use this little area for an RC track, which I think would be kind of cool. There's already some natural, contour elevation change there, which could be fun. Oh, let's see. So these beds we had zinnias in this year. Might remember seeing. We have those cleared out now. The weeds in this area have been quite tough. You see behind this old barn, they just kind of try to spread in all the time. And it's kind of a constant battle, but it's all right. Down over here, we won't go down there right now, but it's where I got willows growing and some other trees propagating. But so that's kind of the back part of the farm. I'll walk towards the front here. So all the fruit trees in the orchard are all dormant. You can kind of see their shape now. Again, this is what's called a 3D electric fence. Has been very effective for keeping deer out. So it would be something to consider. Might make a more detailed video on that at some point. But these are my cherry trees. This was their third season. They'll need, everything in here will need its winter pruning still. It'll probably happen later in the year. So these are the pear trees. Pear trees want to grow really upright. So maybe you can tell some of them grew ridiculously tall, just straight up, but they'll all get pruned down. And you can see this one here, right here is more of a manageable shape and size, and they'll all be kind of like that coming into next year. Peach trees, had our first harvest on those this year. It's pretty good. Last spring, everything kind of budded out early. We had some frost damage and such, but first year for fruit, had a few large ones, and we were able to pick a couple baskets full. Again, all this will need winter pruning. And then these are the apple trees. Everything, or out of everything, the apple trees are the only one that's actually on a dwarving rootstock. So they've grown a lot slower. They've actually been quite far behind the other trees as far as their growth over the last couple of years, until just this year they seem to take off a little bit. All right, so let's show you the dahlia patch. I know you've seen the dahlias a lot. and how grown up and full and bushy the whole patch was, and how many flowers there were. Well, this is it now. Here's the dahlia patch. So it's all ready to go for next year. Um, so what we had to do is, maybe you see the little holes. Where is it? Right there. Kind of threw out. That's where all the stakes were. So I got these 1x1 hardwood stakes that were in there, and then string one all around that, baling twine, to kind of do the corralling method for trellising the dahlias. But that's all gone now, obviously. But we had to cut all the strings, pull all the 1x1 posts out, which here's a little pile still sitting here. But had to pull those out. Use the T-post puller is definitely the easiest way to do that. Several of them broke, and that's fine. We'll replace them as needed, or if they broke, like a foot down or something, they'll just be a little shorter for next year. But they were longer than we needed this year. So yeah, we got all the posts out, cut the plants down to the ground. You can see this is actually two sections of 12-foot landscape or ground cover, and so it just kind of opens like a big book. So we can just peel this right back. You're left with all the tubers and the holes, and just a little stump sticking up. We went around and dug each of them up. After we did that, part of that compost pile you saw was brought over. Each one of these rows was top dressed with some compost. We folded it back closed. So at this point, this is ready to plant again next year. Obviously, I got some cleanup to do along the sides and all that. We'll definitely take care of that. There's some baling twine laying around, and we'll need to make sure we pick all that up, because that won't go well with the lawnmower, I'm sure. But it does feel good to have this taken care of, ready to go, covered back up, and literally just ready to plant. Oh, the other thing we had on here I didn't mention was we had a little short fence. It was keeping little critters out. The deer weren't an issue with this because of the strings, the twine I had up, but I'm not sure squirrels were. But we have groundhogs, and I think the groundhogs were nibbling on everything and really put us behind to start the season last year. So I had some chicken wire that I basically just went around and stapled to the posts on the exterior, the outermost posts, and that was all that was needed to keep the critters out from chewing on the dahlias. They got it started last year, so I had to unstaple all that, more or less, basically just yank it off, and off it comes. But we'll put that back up next year. The same thing, maybe something different, but probably the same thing, because it was simple and effective, and we already had the material sitting around. So that's kind of what we're after here. I don't know if I've really talked about these blueberry rows much. So we have 1, 2, 3 rows of blueberries here, and our soil's not exactly right for blueberries. It's not acidic and all that. And honestly, they've been kind of a low priority for us, so they just haven't been well kept. You can see the weeds. A lot of it's grass. We have rhizome grasses here, which have just been impossibly difficult to manage, but trying to get a handle on that. When we planted this third row, we actually added some ground cover in there. So these are kind of mounded up above the ground, because our ground gets pretty wet, a lot of clay, with holes about the same size as the dahlia holes. I want to say they're 6-inch holes. Went over the crown of the blueberry when we planted it, and it's been much more effective. Now you can see there's lots of weeds growing still. A lot of it's growing through those holes, which I don't think will be that big of an issue, especially once these bushes get bigger. You see they're just kind of getting started. This one looks like it's doing pretty good, but part of what makes it look worse than it is along the edges. It's hard to mow, and honestly, we don't really get the weed whacker out too much around here, because there's just too much to weed whack. It's not really practical. These rows were big bushes that were only moderately productive, Actually, what we did last year is cut them all to the ground, trying to let them regrow. This year, I'll tip them, cut the tips off of all of them so they'll branch out more. And then I want to add landscape or ground cover along these as well, just the same way as those ones. And these are actually in a little raised bed, so do the same thing here, but tuck the landscape ground cover into the edges. They're in here. If you look close, you see the little red twigs. Those are the blueberry plants. They're definitely in there. There's just lots of weeds in there too with them. So we'll go through, pull a bunch of that by hand, which won't be fun, but once we get to it, I'm sure it won't be too bad either. So I mentioned we were out here the other day, and part of what we're doing, what I'm walking to now, is we have this pile of leaves that we collected. So in the fall, we collect all of our leaves from around the house, which are all maple trees, which are the same trees we use for syrup in the springtime. So we collect the leaves. For a long time, when we had lots of chickens, we put them in the room in the barn that had the chicken stayed in. We had 50 chickens. We just filled it full of these leaves in the fall. It'd be like 2 feet deep of fluffy leaves, and then all winter long, the chickens would poop and scratch through it and all that. And in the spring, or actually the next fall, we'd then pull it out. But since this year we only had about a dozen chickens, we got rid of them this fall, and then we'll be getting new chickens in the spring. We just piled up our leaves over here. As you can see, there's a decent little pile. We used a lot of it. There you go. There's a little bit more of a pile. I've already been sitting here for a month or two, or 2 months. They haven't broken down a lot, but they kind of pack down and compress. Pulled this fence back to make easy access to the garden from this side, which isn't normally the case. Although at some point we'd like to add a driveway right here that goes along the garden all the way down towards the barn down there. But we don't have that now, so that's okay. But it was drop that fence, get the leaves in here, show you what we're doing with those before I show you the rest of the garden here. This high tunnel there, I'll make a video about that. That's new to us. But yeah, we'll get a video on that at some point specifically. So anyway, so all these beds, these are where, with these trellises, these are the trellises that we put our tomato plants on. You see that there with the metal conduit and T-post. This is there's a video on YouTube called "A Trellis to Make You Jealous," and it was a very popular video. But this trellis is super simple, it's movable, and not very expensive. I've used it for 4 years maybe, and I've never even taken it down. But it is movable, and I couldn't even tell you what I paid for them. But this is a 16-foot bed, 4 foot by 16, 6 T-posts, 6 of these T's, and then 4 pieces of that conduit. Nothing's secured at all. It's just fed through there. And then come springtime, we'll tie up baling twine to all that. Works great. When I first saw the video about these trellises, I thought, well, isn't it going to fall sideways or something once you get a bunch of weight on there? But nope, does great. These wooden ones, these were my attempt at making something similar. I wanted 4 beds of tomatoes, not just 2, but with materials I already had on hand. I don't know how well you'll be able to tell, but this is one of those landscaping timbers you can buy. but I literally ripped it into quarters to make it much smaller and to make it go further. Pounded that into the ground with my little T-post driver, and it works exactly the same. A little piece. This was all stuff I had on hand, and just made it work. And I've used this one, I think, for 3 years or so, no problem. This one's not as movable because it's screwed together, so that would have to be addressed. And then these ones, of course, I did attach together there like that. But so anyway, so the compost, my son's been moving, filled all the beds back up to the top. If you didn't know, compost as it ages loses volume by as much as 90%, and it's actually just going into the air is where a lot of it's going. So when you have raised beds and you fill them with compost and not like dirt or soil, it'll lose a lot of volume over time. So our beds were originally just filled with manure, like composted manure, and like bedding from, this was cattle manure in here. But and then we just refill it. We just keep topping it up. We put more compost on top, more leaves on top of that. It'll sit for the winter like this. Come springtime, those leaves will really suppress some of the weeds. It also will feed the soil, help mineralize it, and then when I go to plant, I can just push the leaves aside. One thing I've found though is that when we put leaves in our beds like this, it makes it really difficult to direct sow our seed the next spring. So I have a new way to handle that I developed, I think, this last year, that I'm going to try in earnest this year as a direct sowing alternative. But I'll certainly be making some videos about that. Bring you along. Got all these beds put to sleep, ready to go. This one right here is full of garlic. So I planted garlic over it in the elderberry rows as well, just in one aisle as a trial to alley crop that. And then the rest of it is over in this bed. So hoping to grow some culinary garlic and also seed garlic for this next year. So you can stay tuned for that. Here's where is that, right there? Can you see it? Right here's a rose that I bought that I have not been able to get into the ground yet. So, yeah, it's sitting right over here. Kind of hard to tell, but it just healed in. I just dug a hole, shoved the whole plant or the whole pot right in there, and it's going to spend the winter there. A couple of herbs that are going to overwinter. Strawberries, just added leaves right on top of that. Here's our asparagus bed, which we cut down after all the tops turned brown. Added a little compost, some leaves on top. So out here in the flower garden, some of these are going to be perennialized for us. There's yarrow, which we've had success in keeping it year over year. This is feverfew, which will stick around year over year. Some people will keep these each for 2 years and then pull them out and restart them. I don't know. We'll see. I definitely noticed the feverfew we used to have in one of the beds over there, and after a while, it certainly became less effective, less productive. But part of that, I think, is just because it got really crowded. This last spring, we moved it over here, so half of it, actually, that was transplanted, and half of it was fresh, new plants from seed, and it was all quite productive. So I'm suspicious that the issue with the production drop on the feverfew, same story as the yarrow. I suspect the production drop comes from the fact that it gets crowded. So we're going to try to just keep it, and then every 2 or 3 years I might need to dig, split, divide it, and replant it. So we'll go from there. Everything else has pretty much been pulled out. You can see all these beds are just empty. For the most part, we try to Leave roots where we can. Sometimes we pull the roots. There's a few things sticking around in here. These are actually some of the perennial ground covers that are going to go in the orchard. I do have a video on the perennial ground covers already, but I'm sure I'll be making more about those in the future. Here's another one. That's going to be a perennial ground cover. That's a type of sedum right there. That'll get a nice ground cover. It'll bloom for pollinators and all the like. Over here is where I planted my the leftover mash from apple cider making from one of the farm stands that we sell our flowers at. They let me have some of their spent material. Sorry, I don't know how loud that road noise is for you guys, but this piece of fence is just there to keep the well, originally to keep our chickens out that were free ranging, but also to keep the wild birds out. They'll try to find all those seeds. We moved all of our daffodils. There's a bed over there full of daffodils, and now those are in this bed. And let's see, that other bed right behind my ear there. And if you look really close, I'll bring her over here. They're poking up. So the 2024 flower season is underway, but that's always the case. The second, basically the second your daffodils die, they're getting ready for next year, and usually you don't even need to move them. This was snapdragons. This was a great, really productive, beautiful bed for us this year. We cut all these down. We want to get leaves on here still for a little insulation and see what kind of regrowth we get. We'll seed and start another bed as well. But there's kind of an experiment there too to explore how well the snapdragons come back for us. Here's our garden entryway. Two roses here, and they're Dave Austin roses. This was the second year right here. This one I bought the same year, but had it in a different location that wasn't getting enough sun. So I moved it, and obviously it's done well here, but it's just smaller because it hasn't been here as long. This one bloomed real nice early. To start the season, it was about the size of this guy, but it bloomed real nice, then got real big. Late winter, early spring, I'll do some pruning on that and more training to see what kind of winter kill or damage we get from the snow. But that should bloom profusely in the spring and be quite the show. So the idea there, one of them is a soft pink and the other one's a yellow. So you can picture this trellis in full bloom as you come down the pathway to the garden. I've seen this a bit. Here's our rows of elderberry, which have grown up really big this year. Can't remember. I want to say this is their third season in the ground. Yep, that's right, because I planted them in 2020. Last year we had a good harvest. This year we had not a great harvest, and it's my fault because I cut them all to the ground, completely to the ground, and it went. I don't know. Some of them flowered and fruited, and others just plain didn't flower at all, even though they had the year before. So I think it was just too much for them. But look how tall they are. They're still 12 feet tall. There's a few that got to be, there's one over here that's ridiculous. I don't know if you'll be able to tell. There's got to be 14 feet or something. That thing is insanely large. But again, we got clay, wet soil. A lot of stuff doesn't like that, which is why we have raised beds for all of our primary growing. But the elderberry, they're all about it. They'll grow like crazy, even in the wet. A couple spots here sit low. This one right here by the garden shed, right there, that'll sit in a puddle of water for weeks at a time, and it doesn't care. It grows just fine. So if you have wet land, if you have clay, you need to grow elderberry. And then, let's see, maybe the last thing I think we'll show you here is, so this is where I was setting up to grow garlic in the aisle of my elderberries. And we got it tilled up, added compost, added some fertilizer, organic fertilizer. And now I've planted the garlic and put our leaves on it. And let's see. Can you see it? Right here. There it is. They're starting to pop up. If you look real close, you'll see garlic popping up all throughout here. So garlic will all sit there happily all winter long. And I'm not even convinced it needs a whole lot of insulation. Garlic is very hardy. But it's looking good. Like I said, hoping to have some culinary garlic to use, and then some seed garlic to save for myself, and then also to sell. And that hopefully will scale up larger for a little while. Oh yeah, so this last thing I guess is going to be, this is our little garden by the house. Call it our sun garden, only because it's more or less full sun, except for this tree. I don't know, in the afternoons it'll block some of that sun, but things look pretty good. One thing we haven't done a great job with is like evergreen stuff. So a lot of it just dies and looks bare. But this is actually a plum tree, Santa Rosa plum, which I'm pruning to keep it very small. And as an ornamental, probably will still get some fruit off of it eventually. This is my weeping Japanese maple. A couple of Annabelle hydrangeas back there, which I want to train into trees. We'll work on that a little bit next year. And our weeping cherry, which is looking real nice. So, anyways, like I said, haven't really seen or talked to you for a while, so wanted to walk you around, show you what's happening on the farm here. Even though in late December everything just looks dead, it's not. There's actually a lot of life, a lot of potential, and honestly, it's just kind of exciting because you work in the garden all summer long. It's hot some days, frankly, or even kind of miserable. But I love being out here, love getting my hands in the soil, growing things, just kind of seeing the miracle of how things grow. And then the fall comes, and I kind of struggle with, I get a little depressed in the fall. Everything dies, the leaves fall off. I think to myself, geez, I'm not going to be growing anything for nearly 6 months. And I don't know, it can get a little depressing. But here we are, fortunate enough right now to get a warm day, to walk around outside, check on all the plants, see everywhere, think about, all the beautiful flowers we had here last year, all the flowers we're going to have next year. Because the truth is like, it's just going to get better each year. I get better as a person, I get better in my skills as a gardener or grower or farmer or whatever you want to call it. And, at times, just kind of get this irrational hope. And, it's partially because of what I can do out here, what we can grow, or what we can do, and how much I love being out here growing stuff and watching stuff grow. But also, it's like, it's Christmas time. We celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ, who is our Savior. And, the implications of that is just even hard to fathom. And the good news that is. But then the new year, kind of always looking ahead. So thinking about, again, just what we can do next year. And sometimes it just adds up too on even a cloudy day, knowing that the Savior of the world was born for us, and also just knowing that I'm blessed to get to do what I love out here. I don't know, sometimes it just adds up and it's overwhelming, and I'm just grateful. Guess I don't even know what else to say about it besides sometimes it's, I think, silly that I get a little depressed in the fall, because there's a season for everything, and just try to keep that straight in my mind and just give it to the Lord. And I know He always carries me through the good times and the bad. So anyways, just glad you guys could be here to just see what we got going on. You made it this far. I just hope that you feel the love of Christ this Christmas season and in the new year. So just thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next time.